What is up, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Rage, back with another weapon guide to bring to you for the game of Battlefield 2042 and the beta that we had access to. Now, today we're going to be looking at the M5A3 assault rifle, and this was probably the most popular gun that was all around the battlefield that you would have seen. And the reason why is because even though we only had a few guns and a few select ones to be able to mess around with, the M5A3 can be kitted for pretty much every single situation that you possibly can run into. And we're going to have a look into those attachments in a second, but first make sure that you've hit that subscribe button, make sure you've hit that like button to be able to show us that you're obviously interested in these gun guides, and we're going to be bringing some more to you, especially when the game fully drops in November, to be able to give you an idea as to how things have changed, and obviously we'll be able to do these in advance. So let's get right into it. Alright, so let's get into the attachments first, and then we'll get into the stats and how it gets affected. So first off, we're going to go left on the plus system, and obviously you have the standard barrel, which just gives you the regular standard stats that the M5A3 brings to the table. If we go from there to the extended barrel, and that gives you a plus to your projectile velocity, so it should make hitting targets a little bit easier at range, so you don't have to lead as much. This does come at apparently a bonus to your accuracy and range, but I believe that's mainly due to the fact that you don't have to lead as much, and obviously you are extending those firefights, but it does affect your handling apparently, so obviously that will be something to keep in mind. And obviously if you're looking for closer range engagements, maybe that's not the best way to go for it. If obviously that doesn't take your fancy, you can go for the Arkham Tactical Muzzle Brake. What that does is increases your recoil control for vertical, and that means being able to hit targets a lot easier. Now with the M5A3, it doesn't necessarily have a bad recoil pattern. It definitely isn't anywhere compared to the AK, so technically this is kind of null and void. You don't necessarily need this, but if I was to choose out of all these attachments, I would rather go for this muzzle brake, because at least then I'm getting some kind of bonus, whereas the standard barrel doesn't offer me anything, and I don't feel like I need, for the majority of my engagements, I don't need that increased kind of muzzle velocity for the bullets that I'm going to be firing, which is absolutely fine. If we then go from there to the underbarrels, we have the Cobra Grip, which you'll find is a standard for the majority of the weapons that are in the beta, and that gives you increased accuracy while static. From what I can tell from the testing that you'll be able to see in the background, it seems to do more good for your horizontal recoil, which is pretty much better than going for the vertical, for obviously what the muzzle brake offers, because you can control for verticality, but you can't necessarily control for horizontal, or at least not as well. So Cobra Grip is definitely a good one to be able to choose. And lastly, which was kind of unique to it, was you had a 40mm HE grenade launcher underneath, which you could choose from. I didn't get to experiment much with this because it seemed like the majority of the gunfights were very hilly, and most of the times it wasn't very practical to be able to take a grenade launcher to be able to get used to it. So I always went for the grip in my games, but obviously, you know, it's a frag grenade launcher. You're definitely going to be able to cause some destruction to buildings, to vehicles, and you're definitely going to be able to take a few players out. So there's definitely an option there. If we then go from there to the sights, so we're going upwards, you obviously have your standard iron sights, which are fairly nice and clean. They're definitely not hindering whatsoever, so you can definitely get away with those. If you want to, you can go upwards and go for the Fusion Hollow sight, which does give you a very small red dot, and it just makes close quarters engagements a lot easier. It's definitely not a bad sight to go for at all. Just be mindful that it is kind of on the small side. I definitely wish the sight was a little bit bigger, just so I'm able to track my targets a little bit easier. And then lastly, you do have the Mole Hybrid 1.5 to 3x sight, which gives you a combination of the two, and this allows you to be able to extend your ranges out a little bit further, which I found the magnification was very nice for this gun, for the 3 times, and then you can press a button to be able to swap over to the tiny reflex sight that sits on top. So pretty much the best of all worlds there. But that's not all. We do actually have all these ammunition kind of side grades and be able to change on the fly. And interestingly, when you do change this on the fly in game, if you do run out of ammunition for one, you can always swap to another ammunition type, and it will actually give you you'll have like a fresh round of ammunition. So if you find that your standard rounds that you're firing out of this, you can then swap to the close combat or the high power, and then you'll be able to carry on the fight as normal without the need for an ammo box. So just keep that in mind. But obviously, like I mentioned, we got the standard mag, which is which is quite nice, definitely decent. And then we've got the close combat, which gives you bonuses to your recoil control, reload speed, and rate of fire. At least that's what it says it does, but we're going to get into those stats in a second. But this obviously does hurt your damage a little bit because it's more of like a smaller caliber of bullet that you're firing. And then lastly, we've got the high power, which increases your combat range, so you're able to obviously extend those firefights out a little bit more. And this says that it gives you a firepower, accuracy, and range boost, and gives you a minus to your handling. So basically, in terms of the in like a nutshell for all three of them, you've got your standard rounds, which is basically your bread and butter. That's pretty much everything that you need. You've got your close combat to be able to try and rival that of SMG users if you were to be able to enter into a building or some kind of bunker or etc. And you've got your high power to be able to extend for those longer range battles, almost making it kind of like a weaker DMR, but obviously you have that versatility available to you, which is just amazing on this. Alright, so now that is out of the way, let's have a look into the stats for this gun. Now, I wasn't able to grab everything because there was so much to be able to test, and there was only so much time available in the beta, so I was trying to focus on getting footage for pretty much every single one of the weapons, rather than looking individually like all those kind of like in-depth stats for everything. So I managed to get like a basic gist of pretty much everything that is important. So the M5A4 as a standard aims down sight at 267 milliseconds. Now this is 33 milliseconds faster than the AK. So obviously this will be more nimble, it'll be more maneuverable than what the AK has to bring to the table. In terms of mag size, across all three of the attachments, the standard is a 30+1, and the close quarters or close combat is a 35+1, so it gives you a couple extra bullets, and then the high power is a 20+1, so obviously it takes away that just to be able to extend your range a little bit further. So in terms of reloads, there's not much in it, which is pretty much the same as what I found for most of the guns that I've actually tested out in this game. But obviously there are some slight differences, so let's get into those first. So when it comes to the standard magazine, which is obviously your 30 rounds, the reload speed on that is a 2.33 second reload. When it comes to the close combat, this comes in at a 2.23 second reload, so there's like 0.1 of a second in it. Even though it's advertised as a plus, there's really not much in it to be said there. And then when it comes to the high power mag, this comes in at a 2.5 second reload. So there's still not much in it, but obviously there are some very slight differences. So just make sure you bear that in mind when you do actually choose your ammunition types. When it comes to your rate of fire with all the magazines, they do actually have some different rate of fires, which you might have noticed if you did get to test around with this. So when it comes to the standard mag, this comes in around about 786 rounds per minute. Which is kind of fast. It's definitely faster than the AK, but this actually gets bumped up even more when you put on the close combat, because this goes up to around about 830 rounds per minute. So obviously you get a nice little RPM boost to be able to take on those closer quarter kind of engagements, and obviously swapping ammunitions. And then lastly, when it comes to the high power, you have a slower rate of fire, which goes down to 741 rounds per minute, which obviously is it's going to feel slower compared to everything else. You are going to notice it, but on the grand scheme of things, every single one of those is faster than the AK. So as long as you're obviously hitting your shots, you technically should be getting some nice times to kill when it comes to that kind of department. The recoil for all these ammunitions is pretty much low across the whole board. It's definitely manageable, it's definitely easily there, especially when you start putting on that muzzle brake attachment and you put on the grip. You shouldn't really have much difficulty being able to keep these guns on target. It does require a little bit of a pull down on the joystick, or obviously on the mouse when you are using it at a little bit of a longer range, but it's definitely manageable, and it's definitely something I can manage, so if I can, then pretty much every single person can as well. It's just something obviously to keep in mind. When it comes to the time to kill though, because obviously this is really important to be able to see how it kind of competes with everything. I was only managed to get footage for the standard mag, so I'm not able to advise on the close quarters or the high power, but obviously if we were to work off around about the same figures, I figured it was around about a 5-shot to kill at close to medium range. I couldn't test this out at further distances, or at least I don't have the footage to be able to confirm, but if we worked off a 5-shot to kill for all of the magazines, the standard mag will kill in 305 milliseconds, the close quarters will kill in 289, and the high power will kill in 324 milliseconds. So overall, fairly consistent, but the thing to note about this is the fact that all of these times are worse than the AK-24, and that's just with standard ammunition. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to be able to test when we do actually have full access to the game, to be able to see which has the more range. But obviously, in terms of mobility, the M5 definitely wins in that kind of regard. But in terms of the, if you take into the fact the difference between aim down sights, because there's a 33 millisecond difference between the AK and the M5, and then you put in the difference between the times to kill, the AK still theoretically, if you were all to aim down sight and pull the trigger at the same time, the AK will still technically kill faster than the M5, which is quite interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what other stats and or that kind of thing we're going to see from the guns coming forward when that full game does release. So that pretty much wraps up everything that there is important to do with the M5A4. It's definitely a very good gun, it's definitely versatile, and it was a lot of fun to be able to use in the beta. It was easily one of my favourite guns to be able to run around with, and if I was ever struggling or ever needed to, if I was ever finding a bad time with some of the guns, I would easily swap back to this, put on my full setup, which was the 1.5 to 3 times sight, put on the muzzle brake, put on the grip, and then leave it as standard ammunition, and then just go to town. I'd take an ammo box with me because the rate of fire on this, you do tend to burn through your mags a little bit on the quick side, especially if you are making your way through those bushes and trees, so it's nice to be able to have something nearby so you can grab another 2 extra mags and then carry on going and just basically walk your way through all the infantry of the enemy side. Now, obviously, that does leave you a little bit vulnerable to vehicles, but if we were just looking purely from a gameplay or a gunplay kind of perspective, that is the way I would run it, and that's the way I would go. So let's wait until the full game comes out and see if we can actually have some more attachments, be able to mix that up, but you definitely cannot go wrong with this gun. You definitely will have a good time, and I would highly recommend this as your beginner to intermediate kind of gun as well. So that just leaves some time to be able to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've learned something useful with ourselves. If you did, make sure you click that like button, make sure you click that subscribe button, and we'll definitely be bringing some more gun guides out in the near future. Just leaves us a little bit of time to be able to say thank you so much to all the Babylonian members that obviously have joined the Babylonian family. If you are interested to be able to get your name on the end of each of our videos, make sure you click that join button that's located right next to the subscribe button. It really is as simple as 99p a month, and you get to feature in every single one of those, and you get a special role over in our Discord to be able to come chat with us more often. That pretty much wraps it up, so thank you so much, keep yourself safe, keep yourself well, I'll see you all on that next video.